they, them pronouns. My name is Safir. I use they, them pronouns. I am an organizer with Deep Roots Collective. DRC is a abolitionist collective in central Pennsylvania. Um, we are involved in a variety of different organizing, but mostly centered around abolitionist organizing, Palestinian liberation, trans liberation, um, collective liberation. Uh, and yeah, we're here to welcome you to our Street Medic Knowledge Share. Shout out to any street medics in the room. For anyone that has been doing this work for any amount of time, then you know, like I know, that no one is coming to save us, right? The state is not coming to save us. The police are not coming to save us. That it is we who have to save each other. And yeah, as organizers who have been active in protests and demonstrations and direct action, we know that it has been the street medics on the front line, putting their bodies and even their lives right on the line. And today we'll hear from um, people that are active or semi-active in the street medic scene, people that have experience doing this type of work or even just organizing. And we hope that since it seems like it's going to be a little bit of a smaller group today, that we'll have room for more of a dialogue, more of a participatory conversation. We'll have multiple times that we stop throughout the presentation to open up the chat. I mean, to open it up for discussion around slides 8, 13, and 17. We'll open it up. And yeah, I'll be monitoring the chat for any questions in the mean between time. Our comrade Paige is facilitating the slides, and I'll introduce you to our two panelists. Right, the first one is Jack. Jack uh, is active or has been active in street medic crews since 2019. He is certified in first aid, CPR, and AED. Since been an activist since probably about 2011 and participated in all types of events in locations around Northeast on Turtle Island. And our second panelist is Ren. They, them pronouns, revolutionary abolitionist, involved in activism since 2019, has organized music festivals before that since 2014, and has actively been involved on protest security crews for the last 2 years. That's just like a brief explanation. They will tell you about themselves. And as you probably noticed, we're a little bit more unorthodox here. So, they might even want to engage. Let's see. And yeah, so I think that it's important to know that both of these presenters today have experience in organizing, have various levels of experience in street medic knowledge in particular, but yeah, are seasoned in doing this work. And we're hoping to have conversation with anybody else, that may do this work. So I will pass it off to y'all.
Well, I'll just say a quick disclaimer. We're not medical professionals and we cannot give official medical advice. We're just community members sharing our knowledge, experience, the things we've been through. I am first aid certified, but that doesn't mean I am certified to train people in first aid. But I can tell you some things to expect and how to handle certain situations. But I just wanted to make that official disclaimer. We are not certifying anybody today. We're just sharing our experiences and knowledge. And I'll turn it over to Ren to start us off.
Yeah, hey, just want to clarify something in the intro that I didn't catch until just now, that I've experienced in organizing with security for music festivals for many years, not as much as organizing them, doing the security and medic aspects there. So brief background on street medics. So street medics are people that attend direct actions like protest rallies, things like that. And they generally kind of like hang out and in a standby capacity, not generally or always engaging in the actual action, but they just kind of hang around to see if they're needed. And they administer medical aid to participants who get injured during these kind of events.
Well, the Good Samaritan clause is something that's important to mention at the beginning of all this. Good Samaritan clause is something that is nationwide at this point, and it allows people to render aid to injured people, particularly if they're unconscious and you can't get their consent. If you know some way to assist somebody, you will not be held liable for any problems as long as there aren't any gross negligence happening. You know, if you obviously are working beyond your scope and beyond your knowledge and try to perform surgery or something on somebody, you can then be held liable. But if somebody is unconscious, you don't have to worry about trying to help them or removing them from danger or anything like that. You will be covered by the law for what that's worth. Um, and something else that's important, if you ever decide to do medic stuff in any way, shape, or form, it's kind of good to have a little bit of an idea of what the code of conduct is. And I believe right at the bottom of this slide is a link for the code of conduct. I'm not sure if that's what that one is, but there will be links at the end for all the links that are included in these slides, as well as additional links for further research and things like that. So a code of conduct for medics has simple things like only work within your scope, do no harm is always the first one. And there's a whole list of things as to just how to treat people, their consent, and taking a look at the list. It's a pretty long list, but it all really kind of makes sense when you look at it. So that's an important thing to kind of go over if you decide to do street medic stuff. Getting consent is very, very important in these situations. Ren?
All right, so a little brief history on street medics here. On Turtle Island, early versions of what we now know as street medics originated in 1964 during African-American civil rights movement. They were originally organized as Medical Presence Project, MPP, from the Medical Committee for Human Rights, which were the voluntary health corps of the civil rights movement. So though the practice was kept up like throughout in the meantime in various places, street medics became more active on a small scale during the protest activity around Operation Desert Storm in 1990. And then they actions and participatory involvement rejuvenated in 1999 on a larger scale during the meetings of the World Trade Organization in Seattle, Washington, when street medics attended to protesters who were injured by police and from the use of chemical weapons such as pepper spray and tear gas. In the aftermath of the World Trade Organization meeting, protest sympathizers and or attendees organized street medic trainings nationwide in preparation for the next round of anti-globalization marches. Jack.
And that would take us to Occupy Wall Street, which was 2011. That's when that started. And I was in New York at the time. And that was when I first really started getting involved in activism on any kind of a large scale. My first contact face-to-face with street medics was at Occupy Wall Street in Zuccotti Park. And it was also where I first kind of started learning the ins and outs of how to organize and things like affinity groups, which I think we'll discuss later, are basically groups of people who are trying to achieve a common goal. Things like consensus and how majority voting didn't usually work, so we had another way of working around that. All those kind of things I learned at Occupy Wall Street, and I saw the street medics, and their job just totally impressed me, and I thought that was a very needed thing. So when the George Floyd uprising came in 2019, I started serving as a street medic. It started out with me just showing up at rallies with a little tiny first aid kit. And after going to a few of them, a couple of people who were doing the same thing said, "Hey, do you want to organize a little medic crew?" So we did that, and we wound up with a good, I don't know, eight to 12 medics on and off, and that's pretty good for a small little street medic crew. Um, and ever since then, that's what I've been doing. I don't know how many I've actually been involved in, probably over 40, I'm guessing, but somewhere in that vicinity, maybe. Um, we can move on to the next slide, which is the basic responsibilities of the street medic, which is, as I said before, doing no harm. Now, you should always get consent, as I said, and you should ask about allergies. Those are two important things. And when it comes to getting consent, what I tend to do is I introduce myself and I let the person know what my qualifications are. In my case, I can say, "Hi, I'm Jack. I'm certified in first aid. Would you like my assistance?" Or, "I'm certified in first aid. I know how to flush eyes." You don't need to give them all your certifications if it's not needed. And if they say yes, ask them if they have any allergies, except if maybe you're just flushing their eyes with water. You don't really need to ask if they have allergies then. And that takes us to the next thing, which is never working above your scope, which goes back to giving your credentials. Don't say, "I'm trained in first aid," if you haven't been trained. Now, if you know the basics of first aid and have taken basic courses, but you're not certified, you can say you're trained. Don't say you're certified. Don't say you're a street medic. If you actually say you're a medic, you're technically breaking the law if you then assist somebody. So it's always best to say what you are. "I'm trained in first aid," whatever it is. If you're an EMT or something, great, but never work beyond your scope. Only assist people in ways that you have trained in. Another thing is never leaving your patient until they are safe. And that means if they're still injured and you can see they're okay and they sprained an ankle or something and they're with friends and they say, "I'm okay," that's good enough. Then it's kind of on them. But if somebody's unconscious or somebody is hurt badly and are delirious or something like that, make sure you get them to safety and do not leave them until they are out of harm's way and in a safe place. And you got to keep calm. That is so paramount. It's really easy to freak out in those situations, especially when people are turning to you saying, "Help me." So you should always remain calm as best you can and remind others it'll be okay. If it's something like tear gas, it'll only last so long. If you need help, ask your fellow medics or people around you, "Can I get assistance?" Those are important things. If you're going to take the responsibility, you have to be responsible enough to remain calm and try to keep others calm. You'll find that trying to keep others calm will help you remain calm a lot of times too. Remind people to hydrate, which is something I need to do myself, and to make sure that they've eaten. I tend to, as a medic, carry around bottles of water and also granola bar times, those little protein slurpy snack things. Because if people, it happens more often than not, people get riled up, they forget to drink, they forget to eat, they pass out. So reminding them, handing out waters and food, if that's all you have to do as a medic, you've done a great job and you're very lucky that you haven't had to do anything else. But that is something that I'm almost always doing, even at the smallest of rallies. Now, the other responsibility, obviously, is to assist your injured, participants within your scope again. You got to, keep yourself and them safe. And one of the ways to keep them safe is not trying to do stuff that you don't know how to do. You need to communicate with other affinity groups. As I said, that is a group of people who are working towards a common goal, whether it's a security group, a medic group can be an affinity group, whether it's a larger group that takes on bigger actions, but communicate with them and make sure you're all like on the same page. The medics want to make sure they know what security at the rally is doing. Security wants to make sure that, you know, the police liaison knows what's going on. Everybody should be on the same page, and that's up to the medic, even if there's only one or two of you, to go to the people and say, what goes down if this happens, okay? And the last, most important thing, keep yourself safe, because if you can't keep yourself safe, you can't help other people. You have to remain safe in order to do that. And one of the ways of keeping safe is traveling in groups, whether you're a little medic group or with friends.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you a list of some common supplies a street medic might need or carry with them. And we have links in the slides, and the slides will be sent out to people who registered to attend this. And so you can look there for information on more basic and advanced medical supplies for your kit. All right, so firstly, a medic bag. You can use all different kinds of bags. Bags that are normally used for other things. You know, I know Jack's mentioned before to me that he uses like a camera bag, or used to use an old camera bag, as it's like the right kind of shape and space. So you can get creative with that. So things you might want to carry with you are like water and snacks. Definitely some things with carbohydrates. You want to be able to help people. That's a very common thing you're going to see is fatigue and dehydration. Shatterproof. These are some things if you're going to a lot of actions, especially actions that might see state repression. Shatterproof goggles, a gas mask or helmet. A lot of street medics will bring these or wear them actively in preparation for dealing with repression tactics by the state. Personal protection equipment like gloves, face masks, or shields will include like umbrellas, things like that sometimes. A head mount light in case you are out after dark and you need to be able to attend to somebody with very little light around. A change of clothes. This is really important if you run into pepper spray, tear gas, those sorts of chemical warfare where your clothing will be contaminated. And you'll want to, for sure, at least get rid of those and put on something else before the reaction gets worse. And we'll cover that more in a little bit. Ziploc bags and garbage bags, a good way to keep stuff from being contaminated while you're carrying it, or to dispose of contaminated things like clothing, etc. Like I said, an umbrella. Umbrellas are good for keeping things thrown in the air off of you, or what have you. As a very kind of weak shield. Earplugs, especially for things like LRADs, which we'll discuss shortly, is a tactic that the state employs on us. Oven mitt for hot canisters, we'll also cover that in a bit. And like I said, there will be links in the slides that you can follow up with to create your own medic bag for these sort of actions. Jack.
This is a nice simple one. Do's and don'ts. There's a lot of things that go on, but these are the very basic things to remember. That you need to get rest. Do definitely rest. You don't want to go to an action where you're tired or you haven't eaten. You know, you need to have sufficient energy to pull you through. You may think you do, but I don't know how many people in the crowd have actually been to events. Some of them can get very heated, and in that time, you will get tired very quickly. So make sure you're well rested and hydrated. You're going to hear me say this so many times. Hydration and food are like probably the most important thing next to keeping yourself and other people safe. And that's the best way to do it, is stay hydrated. Now, also keep in mind, everybody knows their own bodies. You don't want to drink so much that you get to an event and all of a sudden you have to go to the bathroom, or you eat too much and you start to get sluggish. So it's good to bring those things with you so you can keep doing it as you go. Before any small or large event, I always not just check and organize my stuff. I actually unpack my entire medic bag and repack it every time. It's kind of become a ritual for me. And it just helps me memorize where everything is. So in the heat of the moment, you may think you know where everything is, but I've been in that situation, and that's why I started doing this. Was if you're in the heat of the moment, you can forget real easily. And when you have a compartmentalized bag with, Narcan in one side and bandages in another side and heat packs at another, you want to make sure you get to what you need without having to mess around. So make sure you're organized and know what you have and know how to use what you have. Don't try to use things you don't know how to use. It may be great to carry, a triangle bandage, but if you don't know how to use it, a lot of good it's going to do you, and it's just going to take up space. And always make sure you're communicating with, like I said before, all the organizers. That's an important thing. Even if you're not a medic, it's good to go to these events and go, hey, if something goes down, who's on security? If something goes down, is there a medic? If something goes, whatever, it's good just to introduce yourself and know people. Communicating is very important for all successful organizing. I can't stress that enough. There's a lot of those dues are very important. But the first one may seem a little weird. Don't wear oil-based products. And that includes even things like sunscreen, moisturizer, makeup. I know it's tough to go out without these things sometimes, but if you do happen to get hit with tear gas or pepper spray, those products are going to make the pepper spray and tear gas adhere to you more, and you will have a harder time washing it off. It'll burn longer and more intensely. So especially if it's on your face, you really don't want those things on you. You also don't want to have dangling earrings or necklaces that hang too low or something, especially if they're really strong necklaces, because you can be choked. You want to have free movement, and you don't want things to get caught on things. Wearing contacts is another thing that's tough. Now, me who wears glasses, it's hard to find a gas mask that fits with glasses. I don't have contacts, but I wouldn't wear them to any event, because if you get pepper sprayed or tear gas, you throw them away. They're no good anymore, and they will hold that stuff in your eyes so badly. So should you happen to forget, go to an event, have contacts in, and get some chemicals in your eyes, immediately take them out. Don't try to flush your eyes with contacts in. You have to take them out, and you just throw them away. They're no good after they've been hit with that stuff. And again, don't forget to hydrate. I said I'm going to say it a lot. I'll probably say it a few more times, but those are the basic, most important do's and don'ts, even for non-medics.
So a couple of notes for the next section. When you're doing like a checklist inventory, I know my brother will take everything out of his bag, lay it out on his bed, lay it out on the floor, and run it against a checklist to make sure it has stuff. It's a really good. You get to see everything. It might remind you of something else. Really good thing to use in general, even outside of packing your medic bag. Also, something we didn't mention that I think was inferred, but obviously like a first aid kit, something with bandages, band-aids, antiseptics, like antibacterial cream, things like that. Pretty basic stuff that you would have in any first aid kit would also be really good to have in your medic bag for obvious reasons. And we'll cover a little bit more on that kind of stuff in a bit. Right now, we wanted to stop for a moment and see if there were any questions from people participating in this, or if there were any questions in the chats. I think we're going to start with the chats, check in there first, and then go to y'all.
Nothing in the chats currently.
You can raise your hand, I believe, if you need to bring anything up.
Well, maybe we've just been so straightforward, there's no questions.
All right, cool. Cool, so we're gonna move on to the next section.
All right. Preparation. Mental preparation goes back to getting rest. That's one of the important things. There are lots of different ways to do that. Um, I personally try to meditate a little bit before any action, some sort of grounding, whatever works for you. Just again, keeping a calm, level head is important. So it's good to go into it mentally prepared. You know, if you think it's going to be a crazy night, don't work yourself up. Be prepared for the crazy night, but try to stay on a mellow plane if you can. Do a mental health a mental health self check. That's a tongue twister. Make sure you're doing okay. And if you got to talk to your friends, talk to your comrades, whatever, make sure you're going into it rested and well mentally prepared. And always be sober when you're doing this kind of stuff. You don't want to go being messed up when you're trying to help other people. It's just not good. Okay. And again, get sleep, hydrate. You know, you can't operate on an empty tank. So make sure you have food and water in your system. It is so vital because, as I said, I'll say it 100 times, you get out there and you expend more energy than you really expect you're going to do. So that's something that's really important. And make sure you do your inventory and you have everything that you think you're going to need for what you might encounter. You know, you may know it's going to be a small scale thing. There may not be police involved. You don't have to drag your gas mask to that particular one. Mine is at least in the trunk of my car. So be prepared, but you don't have to be overly prepared if you know you're going into something that is not going to be that volatile. But me being the person that I am always has it nearby anyway. Okay. And just know where your stuff is so you can get to it if you need it.
Right. So we brought this up before, but it's really important to get with others and at the very least use something like a buddy system. Partnering up with different people, you can cover different medical skills, and you can stay safe by keeping in communication with each other and supporting each other. And it's hard to be out there on your own. We are always safer and stronger together. So just to cover a couple of terms like dyad or dual, which is like a buddy system, is you and a partner covering what ground you can together or apart. And then also an affinity group. That's a small group of trusted friends who share principles and goals. So y'all are on the same page. You all are about the same things. Y'all generally go about things the same way or can get through it in communication easily. That's your group. That's who you're going to actions with. That's how you're doing medical support with. These are the safest ways for us to be able to effectively help in these situations. It's really good when you have these sort of structures to have predetermined duties of like who's going to cover what kind of thing. If you need to take shifts, taking turns, taking rest, that's really important if it's going to be a long day. And just generally like look out, care for one another, and make sure, keep each other accountable, make sure that, hey, have you eaten? When was the last time you ate? When was the last time you drank water? Those sort of things are really important. Mental check-ins, just making sure everybody's good. These are all really, really important things for us to keep stamina and be able to do the work that's so really important for these kind of actions.
Communication again comes up as a very important thing, but on the ground communication is something that's important, particularly at larger rallies or events. Smaller ones, it's a little bit easier because there's less of a crowd. But I've been in crowds in Rochester, New York, the night we got tear gassed and pepper sprayed and shot with pepper balls, and they had the dogs out and the LRADs and all that kind of stuff, where the march itself was probably 6 or 7 city blocks long. I couldn't even tell. I'm bad with those kind of numbers, but it was huge. So there was a lot of signaling that had to go on between the medics and security, and hand signals are one thing that are that are used, much like you can use sign language things, whether it's, three, well, that means pig, I think, but cops, whatever. If you can see one another, flashlights are good for getting people's attention. You can have two blinks mean one thing, three blinks mean another. Code words, you don't necessarily know who's listening in. So if you want to talk to somebody, whether it's face to face or over radio or phone, which have their own safety issues, it's good to have code words. Instead of saying we're going to meet at the park, say we'll meet at the pizza place if that's going to be one of the places you might have to go to. Just come up with special words to mean other things. And again, radios and phones are not really safe unless you have fully encrypted. But again, if you get arrested and they get your phone, yeah, make sure you have your biometrics turned off, because when you're in handcuffs, they'll open up your phone and read it. So those things are not safe. But if you have to resort to that, then that's what you have to resort to. Sometimes you can use radio for very menial things, having people in the front, the middle, and the back, slow down, I need a medic, things like that. And you should always have a spot for after the action and a backup, because who knows what may happen. So you say, okay, after the action, we're going to meet at a place away from where the action happened, and you can discuss, these are the good things that happened, these are the things we have to work on, this is what went down, calm each other down, and basically, ease the night away that way. And like I said, it's always kind of a good idea to have a secondary place in mind, just in case something really goes down. Now, if there's any other questions, I don't know.
So, Jack, just real quick before we open up to any questions that there might be, I just wanted to mention that in regards to hand signals and communications in large groups, Deepers Collective is going to be doing a part 2 of our Block Cop City reflections that we did previously, and that's going to be an in-person training where we're going to discuss things like hand tactics and affinity groups, and how to effectively move and communicate in a large crowd. We're going to do that in the spring or summer this year, once the weather gets nice and we can find all the logistics figured out. I also wanted to mention that some things that people, in regard to communication, some things and the buddy system, some things that people do at actions in regards to planning is they will, like Jack mentioned, have a safe meetup space that if anything goes wrong, everybody knows where to go to, and that's predetermined. They also usually, people will get know of a business nearby or some place that's a safe bathroom that's a far enough distance from the action that you're not going to be seen. And it's important that when you do these sorts of things, like going to the bathroom, you're using the buddy system and you're communicating. I think in general, another thing I've seen in actions, action organizing, direct action organizing, is things like when you have a group chat, letting folks know that you're arriving to the action and letting folks know when you leave that action. That way we can make sure that everybody's accounted for, that when we're leaving, nobody's leaving alone. And just all of these things are just little steps and little things that you can coordinate with your friends and your affinity groups that are going to help you to make sure that everybody is staying safe all the time. But yeah, with that, if anybody has questions in the chat or in person, we'd love to hear them.
I don't think so.
I think, okay, so in the chat, Javi has a question. Are hand signals pretty standard, or are those usually determined at each action? That kind of depends on the group organizing the action. If there is some standard communication, if you can build that in your community, where you already have these pre-organized logistics set up, things like security, things like a medic team, things like communication, that may take time. Even in my community, these are things that we're slowly building towards and getting better at with each action and learning from. So if you can set that up beforehand, that would be good. I don't think there are really universal signs. I think it really depends on the people organizing, the people running those sorts of things.
Alicia had a question just asking about, yes, we are recording this and we should have it available up hopefully we'll be able to get it up on YouTube if the recording comes out well enough. Oh, and something I didn't say before before I asked for the questions. Ren covered most of the safe area stuff. Um, I know it's good to have an area for medic people outside of the immediate area, if it's at all possible. For instance, in that larger rally, we actually had a church that let us go in there and have an entire room just for medics, for triage, for people who didn't want to go to the hospital, who, for whatever reasons, they just hurt themselves and they wanted to rest. People who just need, so it's good to have those kind of places if you can get them. And it's also good to have a triage vehicle that is just outside the event, that if you have to get somebody to safety, you can bring them to a vehicle. Again, this is usually for much bigger events, but it's something good to know should you be involved in that, to bring up like, hey, do we have car support that can, should somebody get hurt, we'll meet you at the corner in this corner, and you can either take them to the hospital or take them home or whatever. So that's something important to have at a larger event if it's at all possible.
Are there any other questions from anyone before we move on? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So I'm going to briefly cover some common injuries that you might run into as a street medic. Dehydration, low blood sugar, again, we're going to repeatedly bring this up. It is really, really important that people show up with energy and have food in them, and definitely water. People don't realize how much of a toll it takes to be standing in the streets for hours, to be marching, to be yelling. You're really burning a lot of your energy source, and you just need to make sure that you're prepared. You need to show up prepared. So you are going to see people not doing that, and that's going to be a very common thing you deal with. Sprained and twisted ankles and knees, that'll happen, especially in crowds, especially if something gets chaotic and the crowd has to disperse, like tear gas is deployed, things like that, or LRADs. There might be some panic. That happens in large crowds sometimes, and so you might need to be responding to things like ankle and foot and knee injuries. Abrasions, scrapes, and cuts. Obviously, this can happen in any manner of ways. That's something you're probably going to see a lot. If you have a basic first aid kit with you, you'll be able to manage these sorts of things. Asthma attacks. If there's a way that you could carry an inhaler or some kind of thing like that, that might be helpful. That's going to be something you might see. Heat exhaustion, heat stroke, especially during these summer actions when we're outside in the sun for many, many hours. Again, why water is so important. And hypothermia. We all know that just because it gets cold out, we don't get to stop putting pressure on the system, and so you need to be aware of extreme weather like heat and cold, and be ready for those sorts of things.
Here's the less common things that you hope you don't run into. But if you're involved in any larger city protests, like I've been to, as I said, Rochester, New York City, I faced the New York City riot police. That was fun. But LRAD stands for Long Range Acoustic Device. And it hurts. Let me tell you, it's used in over 500 US cities, and I think it's against the Geneva Convention for us to use it in warfare, but we're allowed to use it on our own civilians. Okay. And earplugs can help because it's going to cause permanent hearing damage. We're talking about something that has the noise of 162 decibels. Okay. And a jet taking off is 120. So it can disorient you. I've seen people throw up from it. Okay. Earplugs can help, but even the best earplugs are only going to block out like 30 decibels. So you're still looking at something louder than a jet being aimed at you in a sonic force. They're horrible. Rubber bullets and beanbags, they're impactful. They can break bones. They can kill you. They can puncture your lungs. They can cause sight loss. They're basically beanbags that are little pillows filled with 40 grams of lead shot and fired from a small cannon. They call it a gun or something, but the they're this big, so they can really cause some serious injury. Shock is something that can happen not just to a person who's getting injured, but a person witnessing these horrible things. If you see somebody going into shock, you need to get them assistance if you can. Immediate professional help if it's some sort of a head injury. Head injuries are something you really can't mess with. If you can raise their legs a little bit off the ground, if you don't think they're spinal injuries, again, these are things like if you see somebody get hit in the head and go down and you think they're in shock, the best you can do is keep them from, and try to keep them from moving if you think they have a head injury, but you need to get a professional for that. Ambulances are the best way to go, even if they get put into the system. You don't want the person dying on you. Okay, head injuries, especially if you get hit in the head, that can cause nausea, vomiting. It'll make people go pale. They'll get the cold sweats. One thing to watch for is fading. They kind of fade in and out. They're not with you, and then they're with you a little. And you need to continually keep talking to them, but calmly. And if you see that it's getting worse or that it's not getting better after like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, again, you need to get this person to professional, because that could be something serious. Concussions are bad enough, but there are a lot of other things that could happen if somebody gets hit in the head with, whether it's a baton or a rubber bullet, a beanbag, a pepper ball, anything like that. You know, you need to ask people when they're hurt, do you know what happened? If they're with friends, do you know what happened? If a head injury is involved, then you're really going to have to play it very safe and probably get a professional. Diabetic shock, um, you'll notice people will go, if they're conscious, sometimes they'll become unconscious. If they're coherent, ask if they have a condition. They may just need some sugar, like juice or candy or something like that. If their sugar's too high and they don't seem to be getting better, again, this is something you need to get them to a professional. Luckily, these things don't happen that often at rallies, but people with diabetes know they have diabetes. Check for bracelets, check for necklaces. It may do some sort of an idea of what's going on if there's nobody around, to let you know that this person's diabetic. Seizures, you need to get assistance if you can. Clear the area, try to support them, but don't restrain them. Don't try to hold them tight. Don't put anything in their mouth. They'll break teeth or choke to death or something like that. You don't want to do that. Okay. And after they're done shaking, sometimes it lasts seconds, sometimes it lasts minutes. Okay. I've had to deal with this both with family and friends. And you just want to lay them on their side to prevent them from choking. That way, should they vomit or something, they're on their side and it comes out. If they're with other people, or if they're conscious, find out if it's normal. Like, do you have seizures? Does your friend have seizures? If it's normal, then it's probably going to be okay. Stay with your patient until they're safe. And they're okay. They're with friends or with families, comrades, something, but if they have not had seizures prior to that, they need to get to a doctor, and they may seem disoriented for a while, but that's something that, you have to deal with as best you can. If they haven't had a seizure before, make sure they get it to a professional. Anaphylactic shock, that's bees, you hear about that all the time. If you can carry an EpiPen, I don't know what they cost now, but technically that's administering a drug. You could get in trouble for that. But if it comes down to saving somebody's life, that's a decision people have to make. If they go into anaphylactic shock and they or their friends or you or someone doesn't have an EpiPen, they need to go to a hospital. They need professional help, definitely. Ren, I'll let you talk about broken bones and dislocated joints because I don't know them so well.
Did you want to talk about heart attacks first before we do that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed heart attacks. Again, if somebody has a heart attack, get them to the hospital. That's the important thing. If you have aspirin and pure aspirin, like Bayer aspirin, that is something to carry in your medic pack. If somebody's having a heart attack, which usually it's the left arm, they'll feel pain in first. If you have them chew on an aspirin, actually chew it, and drink water if you have it, if it's available. That can help them quite often. But if somebody's having a heart attack, be prepared to call out for help, to get a professional, and be prepared to do CPR if you know how to do it, because that may be what it comes down to, is having to give somebody CPR and life-saving breaths. So I recommend everybody learn how to do that. I carry a little CPR mask with me everywhere I go, like I carry Narcan everywhere I go. So if you can get trained in any way, I certainly recommend it. Certified is even better, but that costs money. So
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that point of CPR training, first aid training. Sometimes we run into basic forms of these in our lives, but if you're thinking about being a street medic and helping in that way, it's really important to go and get some more information and get some more training, especially things like CPR. Even since I learned it as a kid in Scouts, that the protocol has changed, and it does change over time. It has changed many times, so it's important to stay up on those trainings, on the very specified ones, because new information may come out that they find that an old version of it, may be more harmful than not. So yeah, just try to keep up on that, and it is really good. We encourage you to get trained up in your free time as much as possible. Um, Other like less common injuries are things like broken bones, dislocated joints. Those fucking suck. Sorry, those suck a lot, and they can be very painful. They can make it so that somebody is unable to move very easily. Um, there are some basic ways to help support these until you can get somebody to further medical attention. But things with like broken bones, for instance, you can use something, an object like stick, piece of wood, something that is hard, and that you can put along, ideally like a limb if there's a broken arm or broken leg, and create a splint of sorts, and use anything you have. This is something I wanted to bring up again, or bring up from something earlier, where in the field you're going to need to really get creative. You're not always going to be able to come to these situations with all the supplies that you need, so you have to work with what you have and what you have available. So even things like when you're creating a splint for somebody, if you don't have anything to attach that with, you need to think about using your own shirt, finding somebody else's shirt, ripping it up, and turning that into rope to attach it to somebody's arm or leg. You just have to use like what is available. That's just the situations that we're in with those sort of things. Dislocated joints, those also suck a lot. Ideally, you want to get somebody's limb back into their joint, but that's not something that you should do unless it is something that you're trained or experienced in. Yeah, I think we're going to move on to chemical warfare.
yeah, and also as Ren had said, like getting training and stuff, there will be links. As you see links, I think these are hyperlinks right in the slides here. But there will be a list of links at the end that have places that you can get certified and trained, as well as other information on so much more than what we're talking about today. And we are talking about quite a bit today. But yeah, chemical warfare and the state. I know Ren and I have both been tear gassed. I believe you've been pepper sprayed, Ren, too. And I've been shot with pepper balls, and they are impactful and leave very nasty, ugly bruises. Pepper versus gas. Well, we've got this. Let's see, capsaicin. I always say that kind of wrong. If you see something marked OC gas, that is pepper spray, not tear gas. Pepper spray is dispensed like from a propellant that also has things like freon and alcohol and butanol in them. So it's not just the pepper, and it's a lot more potent than even if you were to take good old Red's hot sauce and pour it into your eyes. The capsaicin in the state's tear gas, I'm sorry, in their pepper spray is tremendously strong, and it can come in a liquid foam, and there's another. I think they have a gel or something that might be what they put in the pepper balls, and it's a burning sensation, but it's kind of tricking your body. It's telling your body you're being burned, but you're not really being burned. It takes like 1 to 15 minutes for it to all really kind of kick into you, and it's horrible. It's really bad. It tears up your eyes. It gets into all your mucous membranes. If you can, don't swallow. Just keep spitting. Keep spitting. I know we told you to keep hydrating, but if you get pepper spray in your mouth, you don't want to swallow it, because it will burn all the way down. It'll cause heartburn. But the good news is it doesn't last that long. It seems like forever. It can last like 20 minutes to a couple of hours, but the first half hour or so is usually the worst. And you can get your eyes flushed and wash it off your skin with water, but it's still going to kind of sting for a bit. Um, Pepper spray usually comes in little propellant things. You've seen the small ones that, a lot of people carry on their keychains, but the police have big ones like this that shoot 40, 50 feet sometimes. So they don't have to be near the actual impact of where the pepper is going. Pepper balls, as I said, are basically like paintballs full of pepper spray. And those things hit you like paintballs. It left a bruise about that big for 3 weeks on my leg. And it soaks through your clothes. It gets into your clothes. That's, as Ren said earlier, you may need to have a backup set of clothes, um, because if these clothes get hit, you're going to want to take them off and put them in a garbage bag, sometimes double or triple, because that smell will just seep right on out, and it'll get in your car if you throw that bag in your car to leave. So sometimes you may want to consider wearing clothes that you don't really care that much about, having a change of clothes somewhere else, possibly already wrapped up in another garbage bag. And something I don't think I pointed out, but something I do personally, since I've been involved with chemical warfare as a medic, is every individual thing in my bag, in my medic bag, is in a Ziploc baggie. Because should you get hit with pepper spray and you carry in your medic bag, everything in your bag is now no good. So if you yourself are around a lot of pepper spray or gas, you want to make sure your supplies are still safe to use on people. You don't want to put a band-aid on somebody and give them a burning sensation for an hour. So I Ziploc individual packages for wounds. I Ziploc any antibiotics I've got. Make sure you put on new gloves. Do your best to remain as sanitary as possible once that stuff comes out. It's really hard to do, but you got to try your best. And gloves are usually for your protection more than it is for the other person's protection. But in the case of pepper spray, it's for the other person's protection too. If your hands are covered in pepper spray and you're trying to wash out their eyes, you're going to get more pepper in their eyes. You don't want to do that. So umbrellas can help with it, but not as well as, avoiding it completely. So I recommend personally putting all your stuff in a little baggie individually. That keeps it safe. It's a lot of work to do when you do it, but it's worth it if you get hit. Gas. Gas is, I don't know which to say is where gas is worse, because it's a chemical compound that it'll cause, if you have asthma and you think there's going to be gas, or even pepper spray can cause people with asthma and heart problems to have issues, but tear gas particularly. It's, if you see a canister mark CN or CS gas, that is tear gas. And it's more intense version of pepper spray. It burns, it makes your eyes immediately swell and shut, tear up, your nose runs, your mouth salivates, you can get disoriented, you can vomit. It's nasty. Um, if you have breathing problems, pre-existing conditions and stuff like that, you don't want to really get around that stuff. Get away from it as soon as you hear that that tear gas is being dispensed. It takes about 1 to 5 minutes for it to really hit you, but it does last less in general than pepper spray. It only lasts about 15 to 30 minutes, but it leaves a white powdery residue, not just on you, but on the ground. Okay, the next day it was all over the ground. I saw it in the city, and then it rained, and all that went into the sewer system. But as soon as you wet it, as soon as that stuff, that white powder gets wet again, you're reactivating it. So when the state uses pepper spray in conjunction with tear gas, if you get dried tear gas on you, and then you get pepper sprayed and somebody washes your eyes out, you're going to reactivate the powder. So if you can, shake it off, change your clothes, do whatever you can. You know, again, umbrellas can provide protection. Those canisters, if they hit you, they can break your bones. They can kill you if they hit you in the right spot. And they are so hot. Never try to pick it up unless, I believe Ren said earlier, welding gloves or some sort of oven mitt. Pick it up and get it out of the way. If you've got good boots, you can kick it out of the way if you have to, but you try not to kick it into other participants. You know, you kind of want to get it out of there if you can. Make sure you don't grab it. It's going to be an instinct if something's blowing in your face to just pick it up and toss it. Don't do that. Okay. And again, like I said, with the powder, if you can get rid of that stuff, get rid of it as soon as possible. To get rid of your clothes. Ren, I know you've got some experience with this too. You were telling me about how you had to get rid of some of your best clothes over this stuff.
Yeah, I wore my favorite pants, and they were heavily contaminated as to proximity to the canister, so that was a bummer. So definitely wear clothes that you don't give a shit about throwing away, because in these situations you
Right.
will need to.
And you can wash it out sometimes, but make sure that's the only thing you put in the wash. You're probably going to have to put it on the heavy cycle 4 or 5 times. You know, so again,
Yeah, that depends on your
reiterate, try
proximity
not to.
to the canister. If you're real close by, those clothes are probably going to need to be thrown away. If you're far enough away that your exposure was limited, you could possibly do what Jack says to clean them, but ultimately you just need to prepare to get rid of any clothes in case you run into chemical warfare from the state.
Exactly. Exactly. Pepper spray is a little bit easier to wash out, but still, even that could be that stayed in my friend's cars for weeks, and that was just because it was residual on us after we got in the car. And all that stuff can also cause vomiting, even just pepper spray. You know, I had to drive my friend's car away from the action because they couldn't stop throwing up, and it was too much on their lungs and too much. It can hit real hard and quick, so you got to be prepared. Is layering clothing helpful? Yes, I would say yes. That is, you got to be careful if it's hot out. You got to be careful if it's hot out. Um, but yes, that way you can shed a layer of clothing. Hopefully, the underneath isn't so bad. If you're working as a medic, yes, it's good to have a few layers if you can, or a poncho. Sometimes a poncho can help. Okay, flushing eyes, water bottle with a squirt top. That's the best thing to do. You flush from the inside out, making sure you don't flush from this eye into that eye. If you can ask as you see somebody in the picture to get down on their knees or have a seat and you can get behind them, again, before you do this, make sure you get consent because you're going to be coming up to a person who can't see you. They're going to probably be freaked out. They're going to be not knowing what's going on, disoriented. So if you come up to somebody, introduce yourself. Like I will come up and say, "Hi, I'm Jack. I've flushed people's eyes. I'm trained in first aid. Do you want me to help you?" I've never had somebody say no. Okay. And I'll ask them, can you please take a seat if there's a bench nearby or something safe? If not, I'll ask them, is it possible for you to get on your knees and put your hands under your ankles? That'll keep them from doing this and rubbing stuff back in their eyes. It'll also help calm them. Try to remain calm. Remind them, like, what's your name? Hey, okay, I'm Jack. Nice to meet you. This isn't going to last too long. I know this seems horrible. Had it happen before. It's only going to last for a little bit. And then you tell them to blink their eyes a lot as you flush and as you flush. Sometimes you got to do it 2 or 3 times. They'll want to spray it on their face, but don't. Spray it on their face first if you want. But if you spray it on your face, stuff in their hair, stuff in their eyebrows, it's going to get back in their eyes. So try to rinse their face a little, then flush their eyes. There's something called LAW, L-A-W, and I don't mean the cops. It means liquid antacid in water. It's pretty controversial to some people. Some medics use it because it can work topically as well with capsaicin. I don't use it for a variety of reasons. Basically, it's half, I can't remember the brand name, liquid antacid. Malox, half Malox, half water. And the reason I don't use it is because Malox has other chemicals in it that people might be allergic to. And that's not something I want to risk. Water is the safest and best way to go. Water, as I said, will reactivate tear gas. So if you have some apple cider vinegar, that can help with tear gas on your skin. If you soak a bandana in apple cider vinegar and keep it in a Ziploc bag, it can be a makeshift gas mask in the event of tear gas too. You can put that around your mouth and it'll help you breathe a little bit better. It's not going to be as good as a full respirator gas mask, but it will help a little bit. Won't help your eyes, but it will help. There's also something called Vofiba, I think it's pronounced, vegetable oil followed immediately by alcohol. That's stuff only for professionals, where they take vegetable oil and put it on your skin. But again, oil is going to pull that stuff up. If you leave it on your skin, it burns. So they got to wipe it away immediately with alcohol. This starts becoming a little too much. Gas, you can make a 3% sodium carbonate and 10% baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, sodium carbonate, 3% sodium carbonate, 10% sodium bicarbonate, which is baking soda, into 1 liter. And you can rinse your mouth, eyes, nose, skin. But again, I don't recommend this unless you're a professional, because if you don't do it right and there's undissolved things in there, you get it in people's eyes. It's not good. So again, that's working within your scope. If you know about these things and you've researched them and you've talked to other medics, because this is an important thing, learning, just keep learning. If you're going to be a medic, you can't stop learning. And that's any way possible, whether it's, taking courses online, going to the American Heart Association to get certified, talking to fellow medics, trade secrets with them, whatever, talking to your nurse friends or your other, medical professional friends. Getting information is so important, but don't do any of this stuff unless you really know how to do it. Ren?
Yeah, I just also want to reiterate, I've heard plenty of things like vinegar and milk magnesium and things like that to flush eyes. Water is really the best, and almost specifically and mainly for allergy reasons, but especially if you lack the knowledge to implement certain things. Just straight water, although it does reactivate stuff, when you're doing eye flushes, it's usually immediately after somebody's been through that situation. And so it's more about getting it out of people's eyes, because that is like so much about your spatial awareness and your safety. And an experience that I had, I was calling out for help, and somebody came and grabbed me, and another person came up and told me to look up, and they rinsed my eyes out. There was not a lot of communication, but my eyes were closed, and I was asking for help, and that was the help that came. So sometimes that conversation of consent doesn't always happen in the moment, but as long as you can get a general vibe, you should know what to do. So moving into other less common injuries, probably, hopefully, is mental health stuff like stress responses. So stress responses can look like panic and anxiety, being disoriented, things like that. That can happen both from physical injuries and just from trauma and being in certain experiences, especially if it's not something you've been through before. So important when you are talking to somebody who's having stress responses is to not ask too many questions of them. When somebody is in that kind of heightened state of mind, it is very hard to kind of have basic thoughts and have come up with answers to questions. So the first thing you want to do is try to guide that person, and this is true for any medical situation. Jack brought this up before. Guide that person in crisis out of the action if you can. Especially with these sort of situations of stress responses, you want to get them as far away from the noise and the chaos of the action as possible. You do want to check with them about water, hydration, when the last time they ate was, things like that. If you can, or just provide those things in case they want them, because again, they might not be able to answer questions, things like that. Um, in some situations, somebody's having a panic attack, they might be starting to hyperventilate or breathe very quickly and intensely. You want to get that slowed down. So sometimes something as simple as a paper bag can be good to help rebalance the person's oxygen and CO2 levels in their body, and that'll help them calm down more. Um, Other tactics that you can use to try and get people out of their heightened state and calm down their stress responses is things like distraction. So you could have the person focus on external stimuli, have them name some things that they see, like or list off things, 6 things you see or hear or smell or taste or touch. Pick one of those and see if you can get them to do that, and that'll also kind of bring them out of that stress response heightened mental state. If you're able to, there's different types of breathing techniques that you can implement. One is called box breathing, where you're doing equal seconds, 4, 7, 10, whatever, equal seconds in, holding it for that amount of time, or breathing it out for that amount of time, holding, and then repeating the process over. There's a 4-7-8 method, which is breathing in for 4 seconds, holding the breath for 7 seconds, and exhaling for 8 seconds. These sort of rhythmic breathing techniques can help us to calm down and to calm our nervous system down, which is trying to respond in like a fight or flight sort of reaction to what it's dealing with, which it may not even understand fully. So it's important to use these sort of rhythmic breathing techniques. You can implement them to help with this. There's other things, things from different philosophies of focus, of like focusing on your breath, feeling it breathe in through your mouth or your nose, feeling your lungs fill, or doing the same thing with an exhale. Those sort of focusing, I wouldn't call them distraction, but those sort of focusing techniques can sometimes help people become a little more grounded in themselves in the situation to be able to calm down. Whatever you choose, it's really important to guide the person through these actions slowly to help calm down their stress responses. So at this point, if anybody has any questions about what we've covered since the last time we asked about questions, we just wanted to give you all that space before we move on to the next section.
I have a question.
We're thorough.
So how do medics typically identify themselves in actions, and does having some kind of visual identifier make it less likely for the cops to target you?
You want to take that, or do you want me to take that, Ren?
No, that's a you question, Jack.
Okay. Well, because that's a good question. That's actually come up. One of the things we used to do when we had a little street medic crew was decide beforehand, are we identifying openly as medics? Are we wearing, technically the Red Cross is a trademark of the Red Cross. A green cross, or yeah, green is technically the color of first aid, just for verification. But however you're marking yourself, people understand that Red Cross. I have a helmet for those heavy duty actions that I have reflective Red Cross on the front, sides, back. I put it on my front and back. Sometimes it's a little simpler. You can announce to the crowd ahead of time the medics are wearing red armbands or yellow armbands. If you need a medic, just shout medic and one will come to you. But we did decide ahead of time whether or not we were marking ourselves as medics, because it is true that when things get really ugly, the cops are going to try to take out the journalists and the medics, because the journalists are going to report what's really going on, and the medics are the ones who are standing at the sidelines flushing people's eyes out, and they're going back in. So it kind of, medics can be a deterrent to the police action in that we're helping. Um, so you can be targeted very easily at some of the larger things, but sometimes that's where you need to mark yourself more than other times. The truth is, when I was shot with that pepper ball, I was attending to somebody who was on the ground and had been shot in the eye with a pepper ball. Luckily, they were wearing glasses. It shattered their glasses. Their eye was hurt, but they didn't lose their eye. And it was while I was marked as a medic, very well marked, helmet, three sides, back, sides, everywhere I was marked as a medic, I was shot by the police with a pepper ball, which again is something that's against the Geneva Convention, is shooting anything at a medic in a medic situation. So marking yourself is an important thing to decide if you're going to do. If it's a smaller rally, you may not need necessarily to do that, but it's good to let people know there are medics here. If you need a medic, just yell for a medic and they'll come assist you. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, just to add on a couple of points. When I would do support, security, medic support, and stuff like that for music festivals, we would very often wear reflective vests. Again, as Jack said, it's up to you and your affinity group, or you and your friend, to figure out how you want to identify yourselves. Make sure, I don't know if we brought this up, when you're doing medic stuff for actions, it is really good for you and for your affinity group to get in contact with the organizers and to work in tandem with them and with their security, make sure you're identified, work out what that looks like. These are all really important for on-the-ground communication, especially if something goes down, and again, for identification. Safir put in the chat also that for non-Christian medics, people have used red crescents and stars and things like that, etc. But I think that as long as you're putting out some way to signify what you are, that's really important. It's also important to remember that the state, you should count on the state not caring that you're a medic, not caring that you're a caretaker for your community. We've seen in Palestine, in protests all over the nation, and all kinds of uprisings around the world, that state governments will just attack journalists, they will kill medics, they will kill aid providers and things like that, and attack them, and they don't make those distinctions, although they are told to, they don't. And that's the reality of it. So understand that there is an amount of risk that you're putting yourself into by putting yourself in the front lines in this way as a caretaker. So I think, unless there are more questions, we're going to move on to the last section here.
Drugs and alcohol. Well, you left that for me. Okay. Most of us can kind of familiarize ourselves with what the average person who's drunk looks like. If you see somebody at an action who looks like they are intoxicated in some way, it's best to try to get them removed from the action. They're likely to hurt themselves, possibly other people. There are obviously all kinds of drugs that people could be taking that can do a variety of things. So you have to look for people who are acting strangely, people who are, slurring or stumbling, things like that. Maybe even people who are seem to be falling asleep, passing out. You want to get them away from the action because it's going to be something that is not going to be helpful in any way. This goes back to saying, if you're performing not just a medic action, I don't think people should go to events like this intoxicated in any significant way whatsoever. If it's medicinal, that's that. But I don't think people should go to these things in an intoxicated fashion, because it will cause issues for them and potentially harm other people. Now, Narcan, I've said this a couple times. Narcan is something that I carry with me everywhere I go. It's in my car, it's in my backpack. I mean, I don't necessarily carry it in my pockets, but it's usually within reach of me wherever I am. I think it's a very, very important drug. And there's a link right there on how to use Narcan spray. What Narcan is it's first of all, you can get it free in a lot of states, and it's a spray. Usually comes in a spray that you just spray in people's nostrils, and it can stop people who are having overdoses from opioid attacks. And if you if you just hear the news more and more now that nal- naloxone, is that the way it's pronounced? I'm horrible with medicinal names. But now that it's available more readily, you hear more and more how many lives this has saved. So I personally, medic aside, actions aside, everything aside, I personally recommend everybody carry Narcan because it is free in a few states. I'm not sure if it's free here. I know it's free in New York, I think. Um, and even if it's expired, it is not going to hurt the person. It may have a little bit less potency, but it could still save their lives. It can still, is it, I didn't catch that last question, but um, yes, Narcan is important.
Yeah, the question is it bad to use Narcan if you're not sure it's an opioid OD?
No, actually, it's not going to harm anybody in any way, even if they're not ODing on something. I mean, I don't recommend just spraying it up your nose to see what happens, but it's not going to harm anybody if, if they're, of course, there's always the chance people are allergic to some ingredient. I haven't heard of that happening with Narcan at all. But if somebody's having an overdose, go for it. If even if you don't know if it's an opioid or not, it's not going to harm them in any significant way. And that's one of the things that's covered under the Good Samaritan Act is if you spray Narcan up somebody's nose and they still pass away, you're not going to be held responsible for that. You tried to save their life. So I think that link right there on how to use Narcan is very important. And if you just want to check it out online, DuckDuckGo it instead of Googling it. Um, you can find if your state allows it legally and where you can get it. So I recommend it for everybody.
Uh, Before we get to aftercare, I just had a couple more notes about drugs and alcohol. Something with a Narcan is that if it's says it's expired, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's useless. Often expiration dates are put long before it's actually not good to use it. So it's good to do research around that. I also wanted to mention that when you're approaching somebody who is going through some kind of medical crisis, or in this sort of situation, when you're going towards somebody you think might be intoxicated and therefore might be a danger to themselves or the crowd, your attitude towards these situations is really important. It's really good to be kind and to be welcoming and open and make sure that you're being calm and you're speaking calmly. Just because somebody is acting quote unquote strangely doesn't mean that it's an emergency. It doesn't mean that drugs are necessarily involved. And in some of these situations of medical or mental health, or maybe things that you might think might be drugs, it's important to kind of keep the situation calm and not bring too much attention to those because that can also get out of hand when you have a crowd. So if somebody is acting strangely, it's good to just approach and just start talking to them and kind of ask them what's up and gauge from there. And again, if you take some of these trainings about alcohol, about medic stuff, they'll some of them will include bits about how to identify alcohol and drug inebriation. Because even if people are quote unquote acting strangely, again, it does not mean that they're intoxicated. It does not mean that they're a danger to themselves or others. So it's really good to remember these things and to learn.
Definitely 100% right there. Okay. Aftercare is what comes after. Um, it's important to take care of yourself. Again, food, water. I knew I'd say it again. Rehydrating, especially if chemical warfare was involved, that will dehydrate you more. And while you're out there, you may feel okay. You want to hydrate for the next couple of days to recuperate. Make sure you get your nutrients and rest. There may be days where I've had, actions 3 days in a row that were intense. You get your rest where you can and make sure you keep eating and drinking. Okay. Afterwards, you want to also decontaminate yourself. Should you get involved with chemical warfare, obviously you're going to want to take your clothes if you have to dispose of them. When you take a shower, here's an important point I learned the hard way. When you take a shower, use cold water if you're going to be decontaminating yourself from pepper spray and things like that. And make sure you start from the top to the bottom and close your eyes when you do it, because that stuff will stay in your hair, it'll stay in your eyebrows, it gets in your eyelashes. If it's on your skin and you touch yourself again, it's back. So wash yourself from head to toe. Try to keep your hands as clean as possible while you're doing it. Keep re-rinsing your hands because you're going to recontaminate yourself. But close your eyes. Boy, did I learn that one the hard way. Okay. Make sure you get rest, mental, physical, and anything that is persisting, make sure you attend to it. If your feet hurt, soak your feet. If your shoulders hurt, take it easy. Maybe I carry backpacks full of water plus my medic bag. So you got to make sure you're attending to all the things you physically and mentally check over afterwards. Reevaluate your health situation, your mental health, your physical health, and make sure you address the things that need addressing. Because again, you have to keep yourself safe, you have to keep yourself healthy, or else you're not going to be able to go back out and help other people. And that's personally why I do this stuff, is because I'm capable and I have the knowledge, and we have you know hit the ground running.
There was
We
a
have a
question.
question in the chat. Uh, says,
Okay.
will shampoo, body wash, regular soap all be okay to use after chemicals? Like, what should be used after somebody gets hit with these chemicals? I think that's the question.
I personally recommend just using water first, and any kind of like ivory soap would be best, pure soap, something like that. You don't want to use something that has a lot of other heavy chemicals in it necessarily. Another good question, because it may do something. After you've rinsed from head to toe and got the worst of it, then you can go for the shampoo. But I recommend rinsing your hair and body a few times before trying any brand of shampoo that might have a lot of chemicals in it. Even if you have to use soap in your hair to get the first residuals out and then use your shampoo and conditioner, that's what I would recommend. Good question.
Psychological aftercare can look like just general calming and grounding, breathing. Jack has mentioned that he does meditation and that sort of thing to kind of help get us back centered in ourselves. The being in that sort of situation of a rally, an action, a protest, especially in their thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, which happens, it can be very, very intense for our nervous systems. And so it's good to make time and space for grounding in ourselves afterwards. Also, processing the situation, especially if it was a traumatic one, especially deep-based repression. This is something you can do yourself when you're ready, is a little bit of reflection. or talking it through with friends, going over your feelings and the responses to the situation, and just generally like holding space for yourself to get the rest you need. I know we said this before, but you know, you don't want to be going out to doing these things and then not taking aftercare time, getting 4 hours of sleep and having to go to work the next day. That can look like a reality for some people or some version of that. So it's just really important that afterwards you are taking the time to take care of yourself.
Well, I guess we'll throw it out there that before we kind of wrap this all up, if there's any other questions from people. Hmm?
Okay. Yeah, so in conclusion, we just really want to reiterate again, eating and hydration. That's our main suggestion for anybody doing anything like this or going to any of these actions. Stay hydrated, make sure you eat, make sure you're rested. In regards to street medic, keep learning. Even if you are trained, even if you're certified, keep looking for more resources. The internet is alive with conversations and communities in all kinds of spaces, and most definitely in autonomous medical actions like this of being a caretaker for your community during these situations. So find community online, find community in your general area. You know, build community, build affinity groups, work with other medics, work with other people, and like I said, just stay educated and keep educating. And we are going to, as you can see, be providing some other reading and links, and definitely recommend following up with those if this is something to interest you. Encourage your friends to participate, to get trained up. Being a street medic is something that is not discussed all the time when we're talking about revolutionary action, but you know, medics are really vital to everything that we do on the ground. And so it's really good to be prepared, and we really need people to be stepping up as caretakers in these situations. Do you have any other thoughts,
And
Jack, before we go over these, or before we head out?
they usually decide where in action. I didn't catch what the chat thing said.
How do you usually decide where an action will take place? That sort of thing is really left to the action organizers. You know, as a medic, as a street medic, or in that position, you're not necessarily involved in the planning of the action. Sometimes actions are spontaneous. Sometimes they're pre-planned. A lot of times protests and rallies are extensively with coalitions of organizations, and you know, from small and large to just a few people to hundreds of people involved in the planning. Like I said, if you're going to be doing this kind of stuff, it is really good to get in communication with the people that are putting out the information and the calls for the action, and get on the same page as them. And if you're involved in planning and you're involved in heading up a medic team for the action, like that's even better. I hope that answers your question.
Example of any common misses. Actually, to answer that question, Brent, could you read that question?
Yeah, but go ahead.
Well, I figured you read it, and then I can point out that there actually is.
Sure. Do y'all have examples of any common misinformation? The internet is helpful, but not always.
The second to last link on the further reading slide that you're looking at there has 10 first aid mistakes explained by a professional, and those are like kind of the top 10 things that that are often thought to be correct and then are not. So there is some further reading on that, and I will also say that I believe these slides are going to be available to the participants with all the hyperlinks to all these further reading things and all the hyperlinks that were included throughout the presentation. And we're hoping, if everything goes well, to possibly get this up on a YouTube channel we've created so people can watch my face a little more and hopefully spread a little knowledge. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who made this happen, everybody who showed up. Um, Personally, I don't think I've spoken enough. I don't have anything else to say except keep up the fight and see you in the streets. Keep each other safe.
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming out and participating in this knowledge share with us. Appreciate it.